Namaste children. Today we are going to learn about friction. What is friction? Friction is a contact force. How this friction will be arising? Friction results from two surfaces rubbing against each other. Since it is a contact force, whenever an object is moving on a surface, the surface applies a force on the moving object. This force acts in the direction opposite to that of motion. Now, whenever a force is prevailing in between two surfaces that are sliding or trying to slide across one another, this friction always works in the direction opposite to the direction of the object that is moving or trying to move. So this always tries to prevent an object from moving, or it can hinder the motion of the moving object. That is called as frictional force. Force is invisible. So how light energy is invisible? Kinds of forces, that is contact and non-contact forces. Among them, frictional force is one type of contact force which opposes the motion of a moving body. So the two surfaces, that is the surface of the moving object and other surface, when they are in contact, the force which is acting in opposite direction and hinders the motion of a moving object is called as frictional force. Now the magnitude of the force of friction depends upon two things. What are the two factors which are force depends upon the nature of the surfaces in contact, whether the surface is smooth or rough. Next, it is how hard the surface is when you press it. So, when the surface is smooth, friction will be less. When the surface is rough, then the frictional force is more. Not only this, it also depends upon the weight of the moving object which is sliding or moving on the other surface. These are the two factors on which frictional force depends upon. The first is nature of the surface. The second one is, that is, either the surface on which the moving object is moving is rough or smooth. Secondly, it depends upon the weight of the moving object which is sliding over the other surface. So, this magnitude of force of friction can be known by using a spring balance. How the surface affects any surface, if it is a smooth surface or a rough surface, if you observe by using a magnifying glass, then on the surface some ridges and grooves will be there. These ridges and grooves in smooth surface, they are in microscopic level, whereas in case of rough surfaces, the ridges and grooves will be more deeper. So what will happen? They will interlock. The ridge and groove will interlock with one another, and as they move past each other, the ridges of one surface can get stuck in the grooves of the other, so creating a tight locking between the surfaces. When this is applying the force to overcome the interlocking, this applied force, when it is equal to the frictional force, then the object will be stopped on the surface and slows down. So this will be on smooth surface, they are at microscopic level. So on the smooth surface the friction will be less. Next is the weight. It also depends upon the magnitude of frictional force, also depends upon the magnitude of the weight of the sliding body. The sliding body, if it is heavy, its speed or while moving on the surface will slows down very fast, whereas a small weight body will slides faster than the heavy weight body. So these are the two factors on which the magnitude of the frictional force depends upon. Now by using simple activities we can know how the surface or how this frictional force is acting on a moving body. Suppose when you hit a ball, after going on the ground to some extent moving, it automatically stops by itself. This is basing on the surface. Same way, one more example, when you people are playing the carom board, you will be applying some powder on it, because after some time the surface becomes rough and the striker won't move so easily, so it becomes hard on the board to move. So we will be applying some boric acid powder to make the surface smooth. Why? Because the rough surface friction will be more. To reduce that friction and to make the move of the striker on the board, we will be smoothening the surface. This is one more example. And nextly, you take three sliders, that is some inclined planes or slopes at different heights, and you from the same height, the length of the slope, you angle of the slope from the earth surface should be different, and you have to use one ball and drop on the three surfaces at a time and measure the distance traveled by the balls on after coming down, sliding down from the inclined plane or slope. Then how much distance it is traveled linearly on the floor, you calculate and record your observations. So when you compare in the all the three cases, whichever is the slope is less, making less angle, will move less distance, whereas the slope which is more, that will be moving the various distances. You can observe when the slope is less, the ball moving, that means the angle made by the inclined plane with the earth surface, when you throw the ball, then the ball will be moving farther on the linear motion on the surface of the earth. This is called as sliding friction. For example, take some weight and put it on a table. Try to move it on the table. It is very difficult. Suppose the same thing, you keep some pencils on that this block or box you keep and try it to roll on the table, it will be easy. This is a simple activity. Now same thing, you tie a rope to it, try to pull it. Then instead of that, tie some weight on the other end of the thread also, and leave it on the pulley which is fixed to the table. Then in both the cases, if you observe, the sliding will be very easy when it is passed through the pulley. So, and Same way, suppose if you attach wheels to that block and you try it to move on the table, it will be easy. Then when compare these all the three things, see, whenever you are applying some force and if the object is sliding over the surface, it is called as sliding friction. The sliding friction is greater when you are attaching to that same box the wheels. So rolling friction will be less when compared to the sliding friction. Then the rolling friction, that is the reason now all the vehicles will have the tires. Now the types of friction, those are limiting friction, sliding friction, rolling friction and flowing friction. What is meant by limiting friction? Limiting friction is nothing but the force which is applied to a moving object by the surface just to move it on over it is called as limiting friction. Before that, the body is in static condition, that is called as, that is rest. Static means rest, so it is called as static friction. Static friction is the greatest. Then the limiting friction, just the body moves, the applied force, whatever the force which is used to make a body to slide over other body, the starting friction is known as the required friction. And say the required friction to make a body to slide over a surface is known as limiting friction. That is called as the magnitude of frictional force. Then once it starts sliding, when you compare, rather than moving linearly on the surface by touching it completely by base area, that friction is more. When you attach to the same body the wheels, it will roll on the surface very fast. This is rolling friction. So when you compare all these frictions, static friction is greater than sliding friction is greater than rolling friction. The limiting friction is that friction which is the frictional force, the applied force to overcome the static friction. That means just to start the body, a rest body, to move. Now coming to fluid friction. Fluid friction is nothing but, that is fluid. The meaning of the fluid is which can the limiting friction, maximum frictional force that can be developed at the contact surface. Suppose, for example, if a ball is rolling on the surface of a floor, the maximum frictional force in between the area surface which is touching to the surface of the ground, the area covered, and that is the body. When the body is just start moving is called as limiting friction. So this way, if it is moving, this is called as frictional force, linear frictional force. Suppose it is vertically, the weight of the body is acting on the surface, that is called as normal force. This normal force, for this opposite force against to this normal force of the body is gravitational force. Now over this surface, earth surface, when it is moving the body, this is the force, applied force, external force, that is to change the inertia of the property of inertia of rest of the body. Then opposite, always some force is which is acting opposite in the direction of moving object is known as frictional force, that is in the opposite direction. So this frictional force, when it is overcoming by the applied force, just the body starts moving. That is called as limiting friction. Now next, coming to sliding friction. Now when you are pushing an object on a surface, it slide over the surface of the table. Suppose this is the table and this is the applied force you are applying. This is the box. The box is set into motion in this direction, but the surface is applying on the base of this box in opposite direction, that is frictional force. Even then the body is moving on this surface, sliding. So sliding friction, this depends upon the weight of the body, the type of the surface that is sliding across it is either smooth or rough. So this is depending upon the weight of this object as well as the surface. Next, coming to rolling friction. Rolling friction is nothing but whenever object rolls on another surface, that is called as rolling friction. Anything when it is rolling on another surface, then this is easier to overcome the sliding friction. So all the cars, skateboards, ball rollings, ball bears, all will be in the circular shape because rolling friction is less than sliding friction and static friction. So the friction that occurs when an object is rolling on the other surface, that is called as rolling friction. Next, coming to fluid friction. In the fluid friction, fluid means the flow. So usually fluid friction will be occurring in gases and liquid matter because liquids and gases flow. The property of flow which matter shows, that is called as a fluid. So since there the molecules of the matter are having intermolecular spaces, they are free to move within the containers or within the limitations. So for example, gases will have free to flow because large intermolecular spaces in between them. So this fluid friction in the fluid, that means the water, for example, or air, when you consider, they also apply frictional force, which is in case of fluids it is called as buoyancy, whereas in case of gases it is called as drag. So to overcome this fluid frictional forces, what we will say, according to the environment in a habitat to survive, live, the animals will adapt, change their characters, which is known as adaptation. Same way, to overcome this fluid friction, fishes are aquatic animals. See the body shape of the fish. It is streamlined. So this is streamlined because of to overcome the frictional force of this fluid, that is water. Same way the birds will be flying. Its body also streamlined. Seeing all this in the technology, the aeroplane, whatever we made, is a streamlined body. Aeroplanes, spacecraft, which are also streamlined bodies. So these are all, this streamlined body will reduce the fluid friction, that is buoyant force in case of water and drag in case. So to cut through the air force or to cut through the water force, these bodies will have a specific shape, that is streamlined bodies. This is nothing but to overcome the fluid friction. Next, coming to what are the advantages of friction? If friction is not there, we even cannot walk on the floor and we cannot apply the brakes. Then we cannot hold anything with our hand. We cannot write on the board or in a paper. Then we cannot light a matchstick because of rubbing against each other is nothing but friction. That is contact force. So we cannot even fix the nail onto the wall. So friction is necessary, and in the same way friction is also evil. So these are all the advantages what we are doing in the day to day life. Some examples we have given, these are all advantages. Suppose you cannot play the carom board if you won't apply powder on it so many days. When you are playing, the surface will become rough. So that surface, to make it smooth, you will be applying. Even for machines also, if frictional force is more, heat will be generated because of friction. Rubbing two hands against each other, heat energy will be produced. Suppose if that is more, heat energy is more, in case of machines and all, the motors will be spoiled. So even then, so the rolling friction, see, this is the first tire. When it is moving on the road continuously, the grooves all will be vanished and the surface will become smooth, and these tires will wear out, and there is a possibility of skidding. Same way for shoes also, gears will be there. Even steps also, stone steps will be wear out the steps, and stone steps will become. Then breaking of pads, then banners, these are all because of friction. And when you are going down of a slope, this friction is dangerous. Even skaters, roller skaters on the ice, because smooth surface, friction will be very less. So when friction causes heat, because of that heat, what will happen? The spoiling of machines will be occurring, and totally it should be replaced. This is all are the disadvantages. So friction is a boon, at the same time it is an evil. Now how can you increase friction? Because friction is evil in some cases, so you need to increase friction in some cases. That is threading of the tires, giving grooves in the shoe soles, then wiping the ball with wiping the wet ball. Then football shoes will have some studs below. Same way kabaddi players will be wiping the hands with the sand, because so these are all to increase friction. Now in some cases friction will be an evil. So what you have to do, what you will be doing to reduce the friction, you will be applying the lubricants, you will be applying oils, polishing the surface, adding wheels to the luggage, and also using ball bearings in the machines. This is all about the frictional force.